Mindra stopped midway across the plaza. Few things interested him more than the deceased. After all, most of his affiliates were corpses. He turned to locate the young woman's voice he had heard and could see 3 outlined shapes moving through the plaza's fountain through the thickening fog.
May as well see what's going on over there.
As he approached the fountain, the 3 shadows grew more distinct and their voices grew louder.
What do we do now? We can't just leave her here to be found.
A childlike voice replied while someone else, who Mindra presumed to be the young woman he had heard, sniveled and hiccuped through tears.
I just murdered someone.
An older voice muttered in disbelief.
Oh, gods. The constructs will be here any minute for patrol.
Someone's coming.
What?
As Mindra reached the fountain side, he was surprised to see that the voice he had heard did not belong to a young woman, but a young man, maybe a few years younger than Mindra, who had tears rolling down his cheeks.
Who are you?
Mindra turned to see that the childlike voice belonged to a young sea-dweller girl in traditional soldier's armor with a boxfish floating in a sphere of water beside her. Strange. Sea-dwellers were never seen on the surface.
My name is Mindra. I mean no harm or ill will. I simply wish to see what the commotion was about.
He said, flipping his cloak hood off of his head. He shifted his light blonde hair out of his green eyes and tucked a strand behind his somewhat sharp-angled ears before taking in the scene before him. A woman, freshly deceased, lay beside the fountain's edge beneath the statue of Drosniel, the most famous necromancer in the world. There was a bit of irony in the situation, with him now stumbling upon this unusual scene as a necromancer himself.
And it looks as though it's about a corpse. Fortunately, I'm something of an expert on the matter.
The young man beside the fountain's edge looked at him appalled. Mindra noted his embellished attire to be that of a performer and committed his features to memory. The older man standing beside the sea-dweller girl was shielding the woman's body with his own. He was tall and decently built, with misshapen stubble stretched across his chin and sideburns. He had short umber hair that was fading to gray on the sides, light brown eyes, and visible bags beneath them. The stained robe he wore over his casual clothing reeked of alcohol, and indicated he was a studied individual who was well versed in the arcane arts.
May I ask what happened here?
Mindra asked, addressing the older man.
I don't even know where to start.
He began, dragging his hands down his face.
This is not how my evening was supposed to go. I was just fine drowning my sorrows in ale at the Bedshaker Brewery, but no, I'm standing in a fountain beside a dead.
Clanking footsteps echoed through the fog as constructs marched into the plaza and approached the fountain.
What do we do, Axel?
The older man, Axel, directed his attention to Mindra, who raised a questioning brow upon seeing the formations of an idea spark to life in his tired eyes.
Distract them from me, will you? This is only going to take a couple of seconds.
Not giving Mindra the chance to interject, Axel waded out of the fountain and utilized the statue's size for cover. Mindra could hear the hushed words of an enchantment from behind the statue as the leader of the construct unit approached.
You there?
The small legion of constructs came to a halt by the fountain. The construct's leader, marked by a painted sigil on its left shoulder plate from the Blackpool constabulary, addressed Mindra.
State your business here.
I was merely looking for an inn to stay at when I happened upon these individuals who appeared to be in distress.
Mindra stated, glancing in the young man's direction where he still sat by the fountain's edge. He wiped his falling tears with a sleeve and sniffled before rising to his feet. Mindra could see that the young man's hands were shaking, but he nodded to confirm Mindra's split-second testimony.
What is the source of the distress?
which is exactly why I came to investigate.
An unfamiliar voice announced. An elvish man stepped out from behind the obstruction of the fountain where Axel had been. He wore a long coat and looked rather rugged for an elf.
Officer Godlighter.
The construct acknowledged its fellow officer of the law with a salute.
What are you doing here?
I was on my way to the Bedshaker Brewery for a case when I came across this scene and took it upon myself to investigate. It appears that there has been a murder here, and these children were unfortunate enough to stumble upon the body.
The alleged officer reported, gesturing to the body of the woman lying beside the fountain. The constructs remained silent as their magic-infused cranial gears processed what they had been told. They stared at Gauntlighter and the woman's still smoldering body in thought, while the young man beside Mindra held his unsteady breath. Mindra glanced in the elvish man's direction and knew that the visage was a complete ruse. He was familiar with the spell Axel had cast and wondered if it would be enough to fool the constructs.
We were not informed of your case assignment.
The lead construct said, focusing its glass eyes on Gauntlighter.
Please provide the case number.
Mindra looked at Axel, catching his gaze for a brief moment, and it was obvious to Mindra that the disguised man was hesitant to offer an answer. Before Axel could utter a word in response to the construct's question, he was cut off by the raucous cries of a child. Mindra jumped and located the source, the young sea dweller with the boxfish. At some point, and Mindra was rather perplexed by how he had missed her move, she had exited the fountain and came to stand between the near center of the triangular arrangement he and the young man, Axel and the woman's body, and the constructs had made. She held her boxfish close to her chest like a stuffed toy as she cried loud enough that it had everyone's attention.
I'm sorry, Mr. Metalman. I didn't mean to break any rules. I'm new to the surface world and I really don't know where I am, and these nice people were just trying to help me. But then we found this poor lady by the fountain and I got scared and I just want to go home.
She babbled, wiping her tears away with the side of her hand despite their ceaseless flow. Mindra mirrored everyone's wide-eyed expressions. Even the constructs, despite their fixed metal features, appeared unsure of how to handle this situation. Mindra watched as the lead construct approached the sea dweller one methodical step at a time. It stopped in front of her. Puffs of steam escaped its back as it cranked its legs into its body to kneel down. The construct brought its hand up, then down onto her head, then lifted it again and brought it back down.
There.
The lead construct said, offering whatever comfort it could despite its robotic nature.
We will take over from here.
It turned its head to look at Axel in disguise.
Would you escort these children to the nearest inn, Officer Godlighter?
Of course. I'll make sure they get there safely.
He answered, striding over to Mindra and the young man as the lead construct continued to comfort the crying sea dweller. Mindra allowed himself to be pulled aside by Axel as they turned their backs to the constructs who were now searching for evidence, while two of them went to collect the woman's body.
Would you please take them to my home?
Axel asked, making a subtle gesture toward the two younger individuals.
I don't live too far from here. I'll meet you there, but I need to see what they're going to do with her body.
Where do you live?
Axel gave him brief directions before turning to see the construct's progress. The group of robotic beings began to regroup as they obtained what they needed, and a couple more had come to join their leader in comforting the teary-eyed sea dweller.
I can't thank you enough for your help.
Why do you need to see where they take the body?
If he wasn't going to be able to examine the body himself to reanimate it, he at least wanted to know what was to become of it. Axel gave the cobblestone beneath his feet a glance before releasing a weighted huff.
Without evidence, identification, or proof of residency in Blackpool, the construct's programmed to take the bodies somewhere. I'll tell you what happened when I get back. I'd say you could ask one of the kids, but I don't think now is the time. Just get them to my house. Help yourselves to whatever's in my cupboards and wait for me to come back.
Despite his reservations about furthering his involvement, Mindra nodded his understanding and turned to the pink-haired young man.
Let's get out of here.
He said, making a subtle motion for him to follow. He nodded before joining Mindra's side, and they watched as Axel went to collect the sea dweller and her fish. She looked over to Mindra with watery eyes and then directed her attention to Axel. The constructs gave her some space as she met Axel halfway, while still holding her fish friend close.
Where are we going?
That nice gentleman and I are going to take you someplace safe, where you can stay for the night,
he stated before leaning a little closer to her height level and whispering to her.
He's going to take you and that young man back to my home, and I'll meet you there shortly.
Okay, sounds great.
She cheered. The tears stopped, and a bright smile appeared on her face as she strode past the dumbfounded Axel and waved to the constructs. The constructs, being none the wiser to the sudden shift in mood, waved back as she and Axel joined Mindra and the young man who gave her wide-eyed stares.
Let's go!
The three men exchanged wary looks before beginning to head off toward Axel's house. Over his shoulder, Mindra watched as the constructs left in the opposite direction. Once they had put some distance between each other, Mindra turned to Axel, who dropped his disguise and released a long and distressed breath.
All right. You three go make yourselves at my home, and I'll meet you there.
Axel stepped down a side street and began to loop back toward the constructs before anyone could object. Mindra and his two new acquaintances shared a look before he continued to lead them towards Axel's home, wondering what the hell he had just gotten himself into.